Section 17 of Lives of the Queens of England, Volume 6, by Agnes and Elisabeth Strickland. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Elisabeth, Chapter 5, Part 3. The quarrel between Leicester and his royal mistress is, by some authors, supposed to have originated in the following incident, which is related by Sir Thomas Naughton as an evidence that the influence of that nobleman was not so great as many have represented. Bower, the gentleman of the black rod, having been expressly charged by the Queen to be very particular as to whom he admitted into the privy chamber, one day prevented a very gay captain and a follower of Leicester's from entrance, because he was neither well known nor a sworn servant of the Queen's. On which the other, bearing high on his patron's favour, told him, that he might perchance procure him a discharge. Leicester, coming to the contest, said publicly, which was contrary to his custom, that Bower was a knave, and should not long continue in his office, and turned about to go to the Queen. But Bower, who was a bold gentleman and well beloved, stepped before him, fell at her Majesty's feet, and related the story, humbly craving her Grace's pleasure, and whether my Lord of Leicester was king or her Majesty Queen? On which the Queen, turning to Leicester, exclaimed, with her wonted oath, God's death, my lord! I have wished you well, but my favour is not so locked up in you that others shall not participate thereof, for I have many servants, unto whom I have and will, at my pleasure, confer my favour, and likewise resume the same. And if you think to rule here, I will take a course to see you forthcoming. I will have here but one mistress and no master, and look that no ill happen to him, lest it be severely required at your hands. Which so quailed my Lord of Leicester, pursues Naunton, that his feigned humility was long after one of his best virtues. Small, however, at the utmost, were Leicester's claims to this rare quality. Lloyd observes of him, his treasure was vast, his gains unaccountable, all passages to preferment being in his hand, at home and abroad. He was never reconciled to her Majesty under £5,000, nor to a subject under £500, and was ever and anon out with both. Just at this period, Elisabeth lavished much regard on a royal female guest, the Lady Cecilia of Sweden, daughter to the great Gustavus Vasa, and sister to Elizabeth's former suitor, Eric. She and her husband, the Margrave of Baden, had recently encountered many perils and hardships during 11 months' wandering in the northern parts of Germany. At length they landed in England, and 4 days after, the lady was delivered of a son. This child was, on the last day of September, christened in the Chapel Royal at Whitehall, the Queen herself standing godmother in person, the godfathers being the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Duke of Norfolk. The Queen gave the little stranger the name of Edward Fortunatus, for that God had so graciously assisted his mother in her long, dangerous journey, and that she regarded it as an auspicious circumstance that he was born in her realm. The Queen took such great delight in the company and conversation of the Swedish princess, that when the Margrave returned to his own dominions, she persuaded the Lady Cecilia to remain with her, and not only allowed her very honourable boucher or table at her court, 3 messes of meat twice a day for her maids and the rest of her family, but allowed her husband a pension of 2,000 crowns a year as long as he would permit his consort to reside in her court. This lady was given the entree of the Queen's chamber, and enjoyed sufficient influence with Elizabeth to excite the jealousy of her watchful premier, Cecil, who, in a letter to Sir Thomas Smith, betrays some anxiety to discover the real object of her coming to England. Of the Lady Cecilia of Sweden, writes he, your son can report how bountifully she liveth here, of whom also there are sundry opinions, some that she meant to set on foot her brother's former suit of marriage, but perceiving that not to be found probable, some say now that she will further my Lord of Leicester, but if she shall find no success there, then some will say as they list, and thus, you see, all things are subject to reports. In the same letter Cecil observes, that there are rumours that the lords of the court do not agree among themselves, that Leicester was not so much in favour as heretofore, that Sussex and he were on strange terms, that the Duke of Norfolk, the Lord Chamberlain, and Lord Hunsdon were opposed to Leicester. These three peers, and Sussex also, were the kinsmen of the Queen, through her grandmother, Lady Elisabeth Howard. Mr. Heneage is also mentioned by Cecil, as reported to be in very good favour with her Majesty, and so misliked by my Lord of Leicester. To tell you truly, continues the watchful Premier, I think the Queen's favour to my Lord of Leicester is not so manifest to move men to think that she will marry him, and yet his lordship hath favour sufficient, as I hear him say, to his good satisfaction. This letter is dated October 16th. A few days later, the Queen manifested an increase of regard for Leicester, such as made his enemies hasten to effect a reconciliation with him. He received their advances in a conciliatory manner, and took a more subtle revenge on Cecil than if he had exerted his renewed influence to effect his fall, by honouring him with a provoking offer of his patronage, in a tone that could not fail to recall to the mind of the man who ruled the destinies of Protestant Europe, and feared not to controvert and bend to his own policy the declared will of the lion-like sovereign herself, the time when he was an underling official in the train of his own parvenu father, the Duke of Northumberland. I have long known your good qualities, said Leicester, your conscientiousness and knowledge of business. I have on these accounts always loved you, although I know that you would fain marry the Queen to a foreign prince. I will now tell you plainly that I am a claimant for the hand of the Queen, and it seems to me that she looks upon no one with favour but myself. I therefore beseech you that you lay aside all other projects, and then I will always give you my hand, and not only keep you where you are, but take care for your further elevation as you deserve, and as the service of the state may require. Cecil had sufficient command over his feelings to thank the favourite of his good opinion and apparent goodwill. During the period of Elizabeth's transient coolness to Leicester, he had manifested some degree of sullenness, and it is supposed that he testified his resentment by soliciting to be sent on a diplomatic mission to France. When de Foix, through whom Leicester had chosen to prefer his request, mentioned it to the Queen, she was surprised and offended that the Earl should wish to absent himself. She caused him to be summoned to her presence, and asked him if he really wished to go to France, on his replying, that, with her permission, it was one of the things he most desired. She told him, that it would be no great honour to the King of France were she to send a groom to so great a prince. And then she laughingly observed to the ambassador, I cannot live without seeing him every day. He is like my lapdog. So soon as he is seen anywhere, they say I am at hand, and wherever I am seen, it may be said that he is there also. Elisabeth had formerly condescended to discuss with Quatre, the Spanish ambassador, the scandalous reports then prevalent, not only on the continent, but in her own court, regarding her intimacy with Dudley. She even forgot the dignity of a gentlewoman and a sovereign so far as to demonstrate the improbability of what was said, by showing him the situation of her sleeping apartment and that of the favourite. Subsequently, however, she found that her favourite's health was likely to be impaired by the dampness of the room he occupied in the lower story of the palace, and assigned him a chamber contiguous to her own. De Foix, in his report of the 19th of September, says, Leicester has pressed the Queen hard to decide by Christmas on her marriage. She, on the other hand, has entreated him to wait till Candlemas. I know from good authority, pursues he, and have also learned from the most credible persons, that she has promised him marriage before witnesses. Nevertheless, if she chooses to release herself from such promise, no one will summon her to justice, or bear witness against her. At Christmas, Leicester was in close attendance on the Queen, even while she was in the solemn act of communicating at the altar, and was one of her assistants in that holy rite. The ceremonials observed on that occasion have been thus recorded by a contemporary, and are highly curious. On Christmas Day her Majesty came to service, very richly apparelled in a gown of purple velvet, embroidered with silver, very richly set with stones, and a rich collar set with stones. The Earl of Warwick, Leicester's brother, bore the sword. The Lady Strange, the daughter of the Queen's cousin, Lady Eleanor Brandon, bore her train. After the creed, the Queen went down to the offering, and having a short bench with a carpet and a cushion laid by a gentleman usher, her Majesty kneeled down. Her offering was given her by the Marquis of Northampton, after which she went into her traverse, where she abode till the time of the communion, and then came forth and kneeled down on the cushion and carpet. The gentlemen ushers delivered the towel, or the communion cloth, to the Lord Chamberlain, who delivered the same to the beholden by the Earl of Sussex, on her right hand, and the Earl of Leicester on the left. The Bishop of Rochester served her Majesty both with the wine and bread. Then the Queen went into the traverse again, and the Lady Cecilia, wife to the Marquis of Baden, came out of the traverse, and kneeled at the place where the Queen had kneeled, but she had no cushion, only one to kneel on. After she had received, she returned to the traverse again. Then the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Lord Chamberlain received the communion with the mother of the maids, after which the service proceeded to the end. The Queen returned to the chamber of presence, and not to the closet. Her Majesty dined not abroad. Elisabeth was fond of jesting, and now and then perpetrated a pun. This year she sent Man, Dean of Gloucester, as ambassador to Philip of Spain, whose envoy at the English court was Guzman, Dean of Toledo. Elisabeth thought meanly of the person and abilities of Dean Man, and this opinion gave rise to a very bad pun by her Majesty. She said, King Philip had sent Guzman or Guzman to her, and she, in return, had sent a man to him not a whit better than a goose. She also made the following quaint rhyming rebus on a gentleman of the name of Noel. The word of denial and letter of 50 is that gentleman's name that will never be thrifty. A few of the less pleasing traits of Elizabeth's character developed themselves this year, among which may be reckoned her unkind treatment of the venerable Dr. Heath, the non-juring Archbishop of York and formerly Lord Chancellor. It has been shown that he performed good and loyal service for Elizabeth, whose doubtful title was established, beyond dispute, by his making her first proclamation a solemn act of both Houses of Parliament. Subsequently, in 1560, he was ordered into confinement in the Tower, because he would not acknowledge Elizabeth's supremacy over the Church. He remained there till he was sent into a sort of prison restraint, at one of the houses belonging to his see in Yorkshire. His mode of imprisonment permitted him to take walks for exercise. These rambles could not have been very far, for he was turned of 80. They were regarded with jealousy, and the following order of council exists, in answer to a letter from Lord Scrope, relative to the examination by him to be taken of Nicholas Heath, with whom his lordship is required to proceed somewhat sharply withal, to the end that he should declare the full truth why he wandereth abroad, and if he will not be plain, to use some kind of torture to him, so as to be without any great bodily harm, and to advertise his (Lord Scrope's) doings herein. The old man had been on terms of friendship with the Queen, had done her worthy service. He had been considered an opponent of persecution, yet could Elizabeth, then turned of 30, sit in her conclave, and order the unfortunate prisoner to be pinched with the torture, to reveal some vague and indefinite crime, which perhaps only existed in the suspicions of his enemies. Elizabeth had ordered her ministers at the court of Edinburgh, Throckmorton and Randolph, to foment the disaffections there, and especially to encourage Murray and his party in their opposition to the marriage of Mary with Darnley, in consequence of which they at length took up arms against their sovereign. They were defeated and forced to retreat into England. Murray proceeded to London and requested an interview with the Queen, considering doubtless that he had a claim to her favour and protection, having acted in secret understanding with her ministers. The Queen, however, refused at first to see him, or any of the confederates. Murray complained to Cecil and others, that he had been moved to what he had done by the instigation of Queen Elizabeth, whereby he had lost all in Scotland. Elisabeth caused it to be represented to him that this was very displeasing to her, and that she would only see him and his friends on condition of their exonerating her from any share in the plot against his own government. When they had received their lesson, they were admitted to an audience, in the presence of the French and Spanish ambassadors, and falling on their knees, they declared that the queen was innocent of the conspiracy, and had never advised them to disobey their sovereign lady. Now, replied Elisabeth, ye have spoken truth. Get from my presence, traitors as ye are. Thus did she outwit and trample on her own abased instruments. However, she gave Murray a pension secretly. Throckmorton was so indignant at her attempting to treat his intrigues with the unsuccessful Scottish rebels as if unauthorized by herself, that he exposed the secret orders on which he had acted, which was never forgiven by Elizabeth and Leicester, although he had been, as the reader has seen, one of the oldest and most trusty of the friends of her youth. To those she was, generally speaking, attached and grateful. Sir James Crofts she promoted very highly in his military capacity, and after the death of Sir Thomas Parry, made him comptroller of her household. Saintlow, the captain of the yeomen of her guard, who was confined in the Tower at the same time with herself, on suspicion of being a confederate in the plots against Queen Mary, continued in her household after her accession to the throne. She was not always very gracious to him, but condescended nevertheless to obtain from him a horse, for which she only paid him with fair words. This is his account of the matter in a letter he wrote to his wife. The queen yesterday, her own self writing, upon the way craved my horse, unto whom I gave him, receiving openly many goodly words. Elisabeth quarrelled with him the next time they met, all which he thus relates to his better half. The queen found great fault with my long absence, saying, that she would talk with me further, and that she meant to chide me. I answered, that when her highness understood the truth and cause, she would not be offended. To which she said, very well, very well. Howbeit, hand of hers I did not kiss. This year Elizabeth had appointed Sir Henry Sidney to the government of Ireland, addressed to him the following sapient but pedantic letter on the occasion of the feud between the Earls of Desmond and Ormond, in which she prescribes the part he is to take in a series of quaint punning aphorisms, not always apropos to the subject, and rather reminding us of what Lord Byron called hints and howls by way of an oration. Harry, if our partial, slender managing of the contentious quarrel between the two Irish rebels did not make the way to cause these lines to pass my hand, this gibberish should hardly have cumbered your eyes, but warned by my former faults, and dreading worser hap to come, I read or advise you take good heed. Make some difference between tried, just, and false friends. Let the good service of well-deservers be never rewarded with loss. Let their thanks be such as may encourage more strivers for the like. Suffer not that Desmond's daring deeds, far wide from promised works, make you trust to other pledge than himself or John for gage. He hath so well performed his English vows, that I warn you, trust him no farther than you see one of them. Prometheus let me be, and Prometheus hath been mine too long. I pray God you old straying sheep, late as you say, returned into fold, wore not her woolly garment upon her wolfy back. You know a kingdom knows no kindred. Si vult laudum, jus regnum di causa. A strength to harm is perilous in the hand of an ambitious head. Where might is mixed with wit, there is too good an accord in a government. Essays be oft dangerous, specially where the cup-bearer hath received such a preservative as whatsoever betide the drinker's draught, the carrier takes no pain thereby. Believe not, though they swear they can be fully sound, whose parents sought the rule that they full fain would have. I warrant you, they will never be accused of bastardry, they will trace the steps that others have trod before. If I had not espised, though very late, legerdemain used in these cases, I had never played my part. No, if I did not see the balance held awry, I had never myself come into the weigh house. I hope I shall have so good customer of you, that all under officers shall do their duty among you. If aught have been amiss at home, I will patch, though I cannot whole it. Let us not, nor do you consult so long, that advice come too late. Where, then, shall we wish the deeds, while all was spent in words? A fool too late bewares when all the peril is past. If we still advise, we shall never do, yea, and if our web be framed with rotten handles, when our loom is well nigh done, our work is new to begin. God send the weaver true prentices again, and let them be denizens. I pray you, if they be not citizens, and such too as your ancients, aldermen, that have, or now dwell in your official place, have had best cause to commend their good behavior. Let this memorial be only committed to Vulcan's base keeping, without any longer abode than the leisure of the reading thereof. Yea, and no mention made thereof to any other wight, I charge you, as I may command you, seem not to have had but secretary's letters from me. Your loving Mistress, Elisabeth R. Early in the new year arrived Rambouillet, an envoy extraordinary from Charles IX, to invest any two of her Majesty's great nobles, whom it might please her to point out, with the insignia of Saint Michel, the national order of France, which had never before been bestowed on any English subject, save Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk. Elisabeth named her kinsman, the Duke of Norfolk, who then held a distinguished place in her favour, and the Earl of Leicester. It had occasioned great wonder, in the first year of her reign, when this nobleman was chosen as one of the Knights of the Garter, but so many honours and privileges had since been conferred on him, that this was regarded as a matter of course, and every one expected that his next preferment would be the crown matrimonial of England. Elisabeth had promised to give him a decided answer at Candlemas, but when that time came, she still hesitated. Cecil had bided his time, and when he found her dubious, he suggested 6 important objections to the marriage. First, Leicester could bring neither riches, power, nor estimation. Second, he was deeply involved in debt, notwithstanding all that had been lavished upon him. Third, he was surrounded by needy and rapacious dependents, who would engross all the favour and all the patronage of the crown. Fourth, he was so violent and mutable in his passions, one day so jealous, and another so indifferent, that the queen could not expect to live happily with him. Fifth, he was infamed by the death of his wife. And sixth, his marriage with his sovereign would be taken as a confirmation of all the scandalous reports that had been so long and confidently circulated, both at home and abroad. The wedded misery of the Queen of Scots, and the ingratitude, ambition, and misconduct of Darnley, probably operated as a warning to the wary Elisabeth, of the danger she might encounter if she married a subject, and above all, she knew Leicester too well to trust him. The state of excitement in the court and the scandalous reports that were in circulation may be gathered from the careful manner in which the cautious premier guards his colleague at the court of France, Sir Thomas Smith, from giving credit to the gossip that may have been collected by the servant whom he had lately sent to England with his letters. Of my Lord Leicester's absence, writes he, and of his return to favour, if your man tell you tales of the court or city, they be fond, or foolish, and many untrue. Briefly I affirm, that the Queen's Majesty may be by malicious tongues not well reported, but in truth she herself is blameless, and hath no spot of evil intent. Mary there may lack specially in so busy a world, circumspections to avoid all occasions of giving room for invidious observation, Cecil might have added, had he closed the sentence, but he evidently refers with some annoyance to the levity of carriage in his royal mistress, which rendered it necessary for him to render serious testimony to her ambassador in a foreign court, that however her reputation might have suffered, she was herself innocent of actual misconduct. Cecil's letter is dated the 26th of March, 1566, and at that time he appears seriously anxious to promote Elisabeth's marriage with the Archduke, if only to put an end to the disreputable flirtation which was still going on with the man whom she probably loved, but was too proud, too cautious to marry. The matter of Charles, pursues the premier, is of her surely minded, but the progress therein hath many lets. My Lord of Norfolk hath shown himself a very noble man and wise." Norfolk was an earnest advocate of the Austrian marriage, and his disdain of Leicester was never forgiven by the favourite. The rest of the nobility were also anxious for the alliance with Charles. "God direct the queen's marriage in some place," concludes Cecil, "for otherwise her regiment will prove very troublesome and unquiet." By the expression, her regiment, the premier seems to imply her rule, or guidance; but whether the trouble he anticipates would be to himself, in managing his sovereign, or to herself in ruling her aspiring lord, is not quite so clear. Where crowns and sovereigns are at stake, the game must needs be delicately played, by those who hope to win, but Leicester's egotism led him to forget the respect due to his royal mistress, so far as to unbosom himself without reserve to the new French ambassador, La Forêt, who, on the 6th of August, 1566, communicated the following particulars to his own court. "The earl has admitted to me, laughing and sighing at the same time, that he knows not what to hope or fear, that he is more unconcerned than ever whether the queen wishes to marry him or not, that she has so many and great princes suitors that he knows not what to do, or what to think." Subsequently he has said, "I believe not in truth that the queen will ever marry. I have known her, from her 8th year, better than any man upon earth. From that date she has invariably declared that she would remain unmarried. Should she, however, alter that determination, I am all but convinced she would choose no other than myself. At least the queen has done me the honour to say as much to me, and I am as much in her favour as ever." While these doubts and fears, hopes and misgivings, on the subject of love and matrimony were agitating the mighty Elizabeth, her ambitious favourite, her anxious premier and jealous kinsman, Mary Stuart, on the 19th of June, had given birth to a son, who was one day to unite the Britannic Isles in one peaceful and glorious empire. Sir James Melville was dispatched in all haste to announce this joyful event to Elizabeth. The court was then at Greenwich, and Cecil, hastening to the royal presence before Melville was admitted, approached her majesty, who was dancing merrily in the hall after supper, and whispered the news in her ear. The mirth and music ceased, for all present were startled at the sudden change which came over the queen, who, unable to conceal her vexation, sat down, leaning her head on her hand, and then burst out to some of her ladies, who anxiously inquired what ailed her grace. "The Queen of Scots is lighter of a fair son, and I am but a barren stock." This extraordinary lamentation for a maiden queen was duly reported to Melville. When he came next morning to his official audience, his spies and friends told him withal that the queen had been earnestly counselled to conceal her chagrin and show a glad countenance. However, she rather overacted her part, if Melville bears true witness, since, at his introduction, he says, "She welcomed me with a merry volt," which certainly must mean that she cut a caper at the sight of him. She then thanked me for the dispatch I had used, and told me the news I brought had recovered her from a heavy sickness, which had held her 15 days. All this she said and did before I delivered my letter of credence. I told her, when she had read it, that my queen knew of all her friends, her majesty would be the gladdest of the news, albeit her son was dear bought with peril of her life, adding, that she was so sare handled in the meantime, that she wissed she had never married. This I said to give the English queen a little scare of marrying. She boasted sometimes that she was on the point of marrying the Archduke Charles, whenever she was pressed to name the second person, or heir to the English crown. Then I requested her majesty to be a gossip to our queen, for comers or godmothers are called gossips in England. This she granted gladly. Then I said, her majesty would have a fair occasion to see our queen, which she had so oft desired. At this she smiled and said, she wished that her estate and affairs might permit her, and promised to send honourable lords and ladies to supply her place. She sent the Earl of Bedford as her representative to congratulate the queen, and to present her splendid christening gift, a font of gold worth £1,000, which she expressed some fear that the little prince might have overgrown. "If you find it so," said she, "you may observe that our good sister has only to keep it for the next, or some such merry talk. Elizabeth appointed Mary's illegitimate sister, the beautiful Countess of Argyle, to act as her proxy at the baptism of the heir of Scotland, which was performed according to the rites of the Church of Rome. The royal infant received the names of Charles James, though he reigned under that of James alone. Elizabeth was the principal cause of the unfortunate husband of Mary not being present at the baptism of his royal infant, because she had positively enjoined her ambassador to refuse to acknowledge his conventual title of King of Scotland. Section 18.